Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, Bondage hits the mainstream in 50 Shades of Grey. Spongebob goes to the surface, sort of, and sponge out of water. Julianne Moore is a woman who learns she has Alzheimer's in Still Alice. More again in Seventh Son. And we review our final 2014 films, Rosewater and Men, Women, and Children. Our triple feature of older films this week is Trance, Justin's old classic pick, The Royal Tenenbaums, and Oscar-nominated 1940 film Arise, My Love. As we have two Julianne Moore films on our new release docket on the show, this week we will look at her best performances with our top 5. First up, though, is the record-shattering 50 Shades of Grey. This is based on the first in the 100 million selling book series by E.L. James. 50 Shades is a romantic drama that finds timid college student Anastasia Steele, played by Dakota Johnson, interviewing young billionaire Christian Grey, played by Jamie Dornan, about his business for her sick roommate. The two are instantly drawn to each other, and Christian begins courting Anastasia, but she soon finds out about his interesting predilection, namely that he is only interested in a dominant, submissive relationship with her. The film is helmed by female director Sam Taylor Johnson. It would be easy to dismiss 50 Shades for its corny dialogue, questionable morals, and other issues, and I'm sure at least one, if not both of my colleagues here will do just that, but there is more to this movie than what appears on the surface. For one thing, the romance works. It is authentic, and maybe some of the situations are slightly fantastical, but the feelings ring true. And this includes the film's ending, which I thought was very bold for a romance. For another thing, the sex scenes are hot. They do not dominate the film, no pun intended. They make sense with the story, and I found them pretty sexy. My biggest complaints are with the casting of Dornan as Christian Grey and some of the side characters. Dornan is too baby-faced and not believable enough as this powerful, dominating man, not to mention he's not really the best actor. I moved past this as the film went along, but it did take a while. But many of the other characters in the film are useless, yet it seems like we're supposed to care about them, like Christian's siblings, for example. 50 Shades is far from highbrow entertainment, but as romances go, I actually thought it was one of the better ones in recent years. It's a C+ for me. Joe?
C+ is good?
Well,
relatively speaking.
I mean, look at the romances we've had lately.
Well,
Nicholas Sparks.
Yeah, anything by Nicholas Sparks.
Yeah,
I mean, they're usually in the D, C- type range.
At least it deviates.
Yeah.
Well, for me, this movie was just laughable. Literally. Really, I had a great time watching it. It was very funny. The dialogue is terrible. I mean, it's horrible. The acting is mediocre at best. The actions of the characters are more like robots or idiots or robot idiots. However, I think the film is a bit self-aware, which kind of saves it a little bit, with some jokes that seem to be poking fun at the source material, which I actually thought was a little smarter than I was expecting. This worked for some of the comedy, even with some of the more frustrating elements, making it a little more forgivable. I thought it was also shot rather well. I'll leave it with the C-.
Okay. Justin?
If you put glitter on trash, is it still trash? My answer, yes. Now, for most of the people I've talked to, I've never actually read the book, but it has always seemed, just reading minor passages, that it's a terrible source novel that led to a equally terrible adaptation, with actors who have no chemistry. As Joe, I think you hit it right on the head. They are completely robotic, and I almost felt half the time that they were reading off a teleprompter. Mm-hmm. It was uncomfortable. And at 2 hours, I found myself throwing my head up at the back of my seat, just going, when will it end? They have no chemistry. The sex scenes, or lack thereof, there's only like 3 and they're like 5 minutes, which in a 2-hour movie is strange given the source material. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't make much sense with the actual storyline, and the dialogue is so bad.
Dialogue's really bad.
I'll admit it's not the worst lowbrow adaptation I've seen. That will always go to Twilight, which has entered my worst movies ever list. But this is not good. I give it an F.
Oh, wow.
I would be surprised if you gave it anything but. It's much better written than the novel. The novel is horrible. I couldn't finish it. But what about it didn't make sense? You said the sex scenes don't make sense within the movie?
There are so many irrational decisions. The whole lead up to the actual interview, which doesn't even make any sense. He's a businessman. He can reschedule. And the questions he's asking are like tabloidy.
Well, I think they were working off a deadline for the article.
No, I get that.
Okay.
But you're interviewing a millionaire. They will give you an extension. That part doesn't make any sense. And the questions she's asking are atrocious.
Like I said, the plot of this movie doesn't make much sense. I don't think it's really supposed to. And the dialogue is pretty bad, man.
The dialogue is corny. Oh, yeah. I will admit that. It's still much better written than the novel.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard mixed things about the novel too. Honestly.
People love it. I couldn't get into it myself, but story-wise, it is pretty close to what happens in the novel.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's dumb, but I think it's supposed to be fantastical because it's S&M version of your standard romance novel, which is
more or less
pretty, cookie cutter. So it's like,
there's nothing out of the ordinary.
No, which is why
But to me, that adds something to it.
Yeah, I mean
it doesn't make it ordinary at all.
The thing I felt, like I said, was I feel like the movie was kind of self-aware of its source material. I think they were kind of poking at it, so I thought some of the badness was kind of intentional for me. So I mean, I think that the fact that they weren't taking it that seriously, I think they knew it was really silly and they went with it. I don't know if that really spoke to all the acting. I think a lot of the side characters were just. I felt like really.
Well, I didn't really understand their presence, to be honest.
Really, if you just had him and her, you could have pretty much just had the whole movie there.
Really, basically,
that's all it
more
was.
or less.
I mean, and I thought there were some interesting things there. I do agree though that who's the main actor that plays Gray?
Jamie Dornan.
Yeah, he was so stiff, and I do agree with the casting.
They were both really stiff.
They were both really stiff. I mean,
honestly, I like Johnson. I thought she was good.
She did okay. I mean, it's just that I felt like everything was so restrained though. That's when I said they were robotic. Really, it was very stiff for this steamy, sensual movie. Even the sex scenes were relatively brief. I mean, I don't know. I felt like it was a little underwhelming. You said it was steamy. I was expecting.
Yeah, I was turned up by it. I thought it was hot.
I couldn't agree less with that.
I know. I thought.
I mean, that's personal preference, I guess. But
I just thought it was kind of lacking for a really long movie where nothing else really interesting is happening.
I feel like anybody that really enjoyed the book and thought the book was hot would also find these sex scenes hot. They were shot well. It's a little annoying that he didn't take his pants off. It makes it a little unrealistic, but she was naked pretty much the whole movie.
I did find that interesting, actually.
Just a little bit.
Because I felt like more people would be interested in, the other side.
Yes.
I don't know. It was a really strange experience. I feel like I'd say it might. I don't know if it did the source material justice, but I don't know.
What's really strange with it as well is the book has always had this following as like being this really
cutting edge almost
window into this sort of like world of BDSM, which has been criticized heavily. Yet the scenes featuring it, I think there's like only really one that goes really hardcore into it.
Two.
Maybe two. The last one I was like, show me how bad it can get. Hey, this is the worst it gets. I mean, looking at everything else in said room, not nearly as bad.
Well, don't forget the things that they struck from the contract as well.
Yeah, which was, by the way, one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny. I like that. See, that's what I mean. I think
some comedy.
I thought that was legitimately funny. I think it was like, okay, we're gonna have a contract. I mean, it's silly. It doesn't really make any sense, but. I mean, like, I don't know. I was just like, I thought that was funny. You have to have like a breach of contract about your safe zone. I mean, I don't know. I thought that was funny. I mean, it's things like
good scene.
It's things like that saved the movie for me. I mean, if you tried to take it seriously, I think that would be a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
To be honest. I mean, it's not really trying to do too much. I'm surprised you hated it as much as you just did. I mean,
not me.
I thought there were some things that worked okay.
I knew that was an F right for the start.
I just feel like you look at
I did try and give it a fighting chance. I'll say that much.
And just look at some of the other Fs. I feel like, I think that's a little harsh.
Yeah, this is much higher than the other Fs you've given this year. I feel like
I'd say so. I don't know. I mean,
no, this is
it's not.
This is F D- at best. When people were talking about like, oh, Christian Grey is a super creepy guy, after watching this, completely 100% agree. Creeper, stalker.
Well, I guess it did something
possibly
right
misogynistic.
Possibly.
Kind of is, but at least he's
honest about his misogyny.
I mean, Dan said it best. Dominant submissive relationship.
Justin,
is that necessarily misogynistic?
No.
I don't know.
From what I understand about it, he is supposed to be a complicated person that has a sympathetic side that she's trying to help him, make him a better person.
Which
And
they're
he is
trying to.
because by the end of the movie, I mean, he breaks half of his rules for her.
He is trying to
because he has fallen in love.
Try to love her as opposed to being more physical.
That's why the romance works.
That's it. Like I said, there are some, it's okay. I mean, it's basic, but that's why it's so popular. It's a common fantasy.
You could say that.
It is common fantasy.
Yeah,
you know,
you could say that.
it's it's not groundbreaking or anything, but it's all right.
All right. Well, up next we have SpongeBob, Sponge Out of Water, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
Well, Sponge Out of Water is an animated / live action adventure comedy film based on the Nickelodeon television series SpongeBob SquarePants, maybe you've heard of it, created by Steven Hillenburg. The film is a sequel, apparently, a direct sequel to the 2004 animated film, The SpongeBob SquarePants Movie, which I saw a very long time ago. It is directed by the show writer and executive producer Paul Tibbitt, who was actually the main creator in the early days of SpongeBob, when it was actually good, which I learned about recently. I was like, oh, okay.
Once upon a time.
Explains one or two things. When a diabolical pirate played by Antonio Banderas above the sea steals the secret Krabby Patty formula, which everyone always seems to want, SpongeBob and his nemesis Plankton must team up in order to get it back, which is not the first time this has happened, so, kind of expected it. He and his friends even go ashore, becoming 3D in the process. Never was I really a huge fan of the show, but the few episodes I saw in the heyday could really be entertaining and even witty. Since the creators are behind the film, that is why it was much better than I expected it to be. It was wacky and surreal, but also clever and well-paced. I found this one rather enjoyable to sit through, and I give it a B.
Justin, what'd you think of SpongeBob?
Well, the first movie kind of falls into guilty pleasure territory for me. It's dumb, it's ridiculous, much like the show. But at the same time, I kind of had fun watching it. The biggest problem I have with the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, is it's about a decade too late. SpongeBob has more than overextended his welcome, and while I can never say I've been a fan, but it's been one of those shows that when it was on, I would always sort of sit down and watch it because there was nothing else on.
Yeah.
But when I can name episodes from way back when that the storyline of this movie is ripping off blatantly, I have massive issues. I'm not going to try and deny it. Some laughs were definitely had with this movie. There's definitely some entertaining moments. And the finale, while completely out of control, is at least fun to watch. But if this is not a sign that the series needs to end, I don't know what is. I give it a C+.
Well, gentlemen, I don't know much from SpongeBob. I've seen maybe 2 episodes.
I need to say.
Did not see the first movie at all. So I'm going to give you guys my nephew's review of this movie.
Okay.
Because I saw it with him, and I agreed 100%. He is not aware that there's a podcast that I do, but he seems to want to follow in the footsteps. After the movie, I could tell he didn't really like it, because usually he says it was great, and he just kind of sat there in silence. So I said, what'd you think? He looked at me and he said, well, it needs focus. It needs some script help. The comedy worked, the action didn't. And why were they only out of water for 25 minutes?
Oh.
The rest of the movie feels like it's an hour-long episode. I could not have said it any better myself. That is exactly the problem with this movie.
Interesting.
All of those things. The whole reason for anybody to go see this movie is that they're out of water. What happened until the last 20-25 minutes, I don't know. Antonio Banderas, I thought, was, giving it his all. He did a good job with the live action parts. But we also don't get to see our favorite characters enough. I love Patrick. He's barely in this movie. He's really, the sidekick, I would say, of the whole show, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Sandy Squirrel, I was never a fan, but she's not in it very much either.
Neither is Squidward.
No.
And neither is Squidward. Plankton is the second banana in this movie, and to me that is got to be a letdown for fans of this.
Plankton's pretty popular.
Is he?
Yeah, he's like the main villain of the show.
Well,
I always liked him.
that's fine, but they already have a villain in Antonio Banderas.
Yeah.
That was the villain of the movie. They should have stuck with that. They have Plankton for the episodes. Sort of like the Simpsons movie. They didn't just have Mr. Burns, block out the sun. They made a whole new thing, for an example. So I'm with Justin. I give the film a C+. I wish that there was more to it. I did laugh. I thought it was kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
No, there are definitely some funny moments. It's just too little too late. And, the last 20 minutes, I'm totally with you. I don't know why it took us so long to get there when the trailer was amping that up so
It's
heavily.
all that was in the trailer.
Yeah.
And most of the gags that we saw in the trailer, because it's a 2.5-minute trailer and they're only above water for 20 minutes. So pretty much all the good gags we already saw. Joe, that wasn't such a factor for you?
No, I didn't care.
You're Mr. Marketing over there.
Well, yeah, I mean, like,
you hate the trailers of everything.
Yeah, I know. I normally do, but I didn't really like the way it looked anyway. I think the amount of water 3D is stupid. I like traditional animation. This reminded me of the episodes. I haven't seen Spongebob in like 10 years.
Okay.
So, I mean, for me...
So for you, it was actually kind of fresh.
For me, it was like, wow, I'm actually watching a couple good episodes of the show I kind of liked when I was a kid, and I actually really liked that. When they went out, I was like, okay... It was my least favorite part of the movie. So, I actually really enjoyed the stuff leading up to it.
Okay.
I liked seeing Plankton again. So for me, maybe it was a little more nostalgic, but this is some of the best SpongeBob I've ever seen.
Okay.
So, I don't know. It was interesting.
Justin, what do you think of the nostalgia factor of it? You're saying it's 10 years too late. I don't necessarily agree with that because
People
you look
still
at...
like it. Somehow.
I mean, to bring up the Simpsons movie again, that came out in like the 19th year of the show.
That's a little too late.
I can't agree that it's too late if there's an audience for it. Obviously, it did big numbers. People were excited about it. So I don't know if the timing of it was bad. I just don't think it gave the audience what they wanted.
Well, I feel like where I was coming from with the fact that it's a decade too late is we had the original SpongeBob movie in 2004. My biggest issue with this, and which floored me when you led with your synopsis that it was directed by one of the main creators, because it felt like it was a SpongeBob movie directed by someone who doesn't like SpongeBob, and there are like all these little plot points that seem to almost negate some of the things that happened in the earlier show. Plankton is a sort of anti-hero now. The fact that the Krabby Patty recipe has been revealed before, and it's kind of been a big deal. It's just bizarre to me that this would actually be one of the main ideas.
Yeah, I looked it up. All the main people that like started the show, like the main writers, like all 4 of them did the movie. So
Floors me.
So, well,
I do not get that.
I mean, I don't know. Apparently, the show sucked for a long time. I haven't watched it in a long time, so for me, it felt like nothing had changed. Mm-hmm. Like, the sponge out of water part, like, okay, it was cool seeing it, I guess, but I liked seeing the actual stuff. And to be fair, I saw this in a huge theater. It was packed. Everybody was having a great time. So you guys say it doesn't give the audience what they wanted? It gave the audience what they wanted. They were fine with it. And most people were. This movie's pretty well liked, so... I'm fine with my grade.
I'm not saying you should change it.
No.
I just think that if you're, I think the only reason people went to see this movie was to see the out of water, because you look at recent examples of full length animated features not based on TV shows, but that have TV shows. How to Train Your Dragon 2, The Penguins of Madagascar. Mm-hmm. Both of those disappointed at the box office because people can watch the episode for free. Doesn't matter. If this movie was advertised from the first hour of the film, nobody would have gone to see it, I think.
You're probably right. And you know what that is? That's good marketing.
It's good marketing, I guess, maybe.
So, hey.
To me, it was frustrating marketing.
Well, it seemed to not disappoint the audience I was with, so
right.
I don't know. I was okay with it.
All right, well, up next is Still Alice, Julianne Moore coming off her Oscar win, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
Alice Howland, played by Julianne Moore, is a well-established professor of linguistics until the day she starts forgetting words. After a diagnosis shows that Alice is showing early signs of Alzheimer's, all of her ties with her family are tested, particularly with her husband, John, played by Alec Baldwin, and her actress daughter, Lydia, played by Kristen Stewart. Moore gives an absolute top-notch performance, and my only real regret, I wish she had better people to play off of. Baldwin and Stewart are honestly trying, but they just can't keep up with Moore. Unfortunately, I think it also runs on a bit too long, and gets more than a little preachy by the end of it, but still a absolutely fantastic performance, and a mostly strong movie. I give it a B+.
All right, well, Joe, you had this in your top 10 of 2014, so let's hear what you really think of Still Alice.
Julianne Moore just blows it out of the water with this movie. It's probably her best performance ever. This film delves into subject matter respectively and with much believability. It's a heart-wrenching tale that unfolds beautifully despite the tragedy, really allowing you to get to know these people and how the event slowly but dramatically changes their lives. Still, it somehow does provide some hope. I give it an A+.
Wow, good A+, Joe. For me, this is easily one of the best performances of the year. Obviously, later on in the show, we'll all talk about our favorite Julianne Moore performances. But, this has got to be up there for anybody that has seen this film. It's one of the most realistic portrayals of the disease as well. There's great moments of both high drama and more subtle elements that Moore lends to the role. Stewart gives her greatest performance here as well. I don't agree with that, Justin. I will agree, though, Alec Baldwin was kind of just there. In fact, everyone other than Kristen Stewart and Julianne Moore is kind of just there. The rest of the family just doesn't offer very much, unfortunately. It is, of course, Alice's story, but it would have been nice to get a little bit more from the rest of the people in her life, including Baldwin, who seems half unaffected by the news anyway. I'm sort of between you guys. It's an A- for me. Very, very enjoyable. Definitely not of that A+ caliber for me. What was it that really put it up above and beyond, Joe?
It just really touched me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't really cry in movies.
You cried in this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was... Fair. I liked the way the movie took its time, because, I mean, you really felt like the writing was just incredible, because it seemed to imitate life so well. Mm-hmm. Because it was all these subtle little hints. Like, even at the beginning of the movie, you just see her as this really accomplished individual with all this knowledge, and she's an expert in communication, linguistics of all things, and then just forgets one little thing, and...
It all comes crumbling down.
It reminded me of people in my life.
Okay.
Little things that happen, and then you just realize, that could really be the beginning of something else. And I felt like the whole movie was like that, and everybody was affected by that. Now, I will admit, you could argue that you didn't get to see as much from the family. I didn't think that was important. The scenes that were in, you saw that they were affected. Alec Baldwin's character, you're right, it looks like he's half affected. That's obviously might be his way of dealing with it. Honestly, possibly. I mean, really, that just seems to be the character. He's half still thinking about not accepting it and dealing with his work as well. Mm-hmm. See that their whole movie, so I thought that was excellent. Kirsten Stewart does a great job in this movie as well.
She really does.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean,
yeah, it blew me away.
It's probably the best performance I've seen from her, too. Mm-hmm. Her with Moore I thought was great. So I don't think it's entirely the Moore show, but I thought everybody's performance was good. I thought the writing was excellent. I thought it was some of the best acting I've ever seen, and really just a beautiful, honest story. And really, it's probably the most honest, believable, true-ish story that came out last year. So I think that speaks more than any other of the semi-biographical ones, I think.
Right.
And that's really impressive.
Justin, I mean, what do you think about Kristen Stewart? You thought she was, wooden?
No, I mean, don't get me wrong, she's definitely giving it her all. It's just, I don't think she's that kind of actress who can really knock it out of the park with a role like this. She's trying, but she's also still in that Kristen Stewart mindset, biting her lip, constantly over-exaggerating everything, fidgety.
I
thought it worked for the character.
I've seen
personally
a lot of her movies, and I've never seen her give a performance like this. I really thought...
I'm not arguing that it's on par with those. I'm just saying it's definitely her best performance.
Okay.
It's just, she's just not that good an actress.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I will admit, Justin, I think you said it ran on a little too long. Maybe that last little section, maybe not necessary. But I thought it was kind of necessary, or else if it ended a different way.
I thought the pacing was pretty good.
I thought I know the segue you're talking about, and I did think about that. But if we didn't see that, I feel like it would have been a less enjoyable ending.
I like the way it wraps up. It's just some of the stuff leading into that with the start of the third act kind of bugged me. Like, I do love her monologue that she gives near the climax. However, the way they shoot it as this big, preachy, let's make this a message movie, kind of irked me a little bit.
I can see why you might pick up on that, but once again, this is pretty honest, and this is the first movie really about Alzheimer's I've ever seen. And like I said, I think it's delved... In fact, it's been written that it delves more into the subject than any other movie.
There's a few out there away from her I've brought up on this show before as... debut directors with Sarah Polley, and that deals with it in a much older. It's like they're senior citizens in this movie.
Oh yeah,
as opposed to Julianne Moore, but it was not as honest as this. I didn't think.
And I just feel like you're right. I could see that, but I didn't take that as being preachy. I thought that was just a woman bearing her soul, which I think if you think that's preachy, yeah, she was preaching. And is that Oscar baiting? Yeah,
probably.
But it worked for me.
I mean, I kept waiting after that scene to cut to black and be like, if you know someone who has Alzheimer's, call such and such number.
I don't know. I didn't think it was trying to be too pushy. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think about it that much. It's another one of those movies where there were obviously people that might have experienced that because it was mostly an older crowd. I saw it at the Midtown Theater, you guys know, and there were people crying all over behind me.
I believe it.
I mean, I don't know. You know,
I don't doubt it for a second.
So I don't know. I think this worked for its audience and for other audiences. I think it's a very powerful movie.
I just wish the other characters were a little more involved. That was my big complaint with it, but it's definitely a great movie. All right, up next is Seventh Son, another Julianne Moore flick, maybe on the other end of the spectrum. Joe?
Another great movie. Seventh Son is an American epic fantasy film directed by Sergei Bodrov and starring Ben Barnes, Jeff Bridges, and Julianne Moore in another movie. It features music composed by Marco Beltrami, who replaced A.R. Rahman, and Tomas Cantillon. It is based on the novel The Spook's Apprentice, titled The Last Apprentice, Revenge of the Witch in America. I think it's a good idea they changed the title, which is actually part of this long-running YA adaptation series, which I never heard of. The story centers on Thomas Ward, played by Barnes, as the seventh son of the seventh son, which, if you don't know, in certain European mythology that endows certain people, if they are the seventh son, they get measurable powers, and they touch on that in the movie. And his adventures as the apprentice of the spook, John Gregory, played by Reuters, as they attempt to stop the rise of the evil witch Malkin, played by Julianne Moore. Now, I like the concept and general style of this movie, I guess, though it's incredibly dark. Literally, it's just really dark. Though it didn't seem that refined. I enjoy some of the performances, but the film really seemed to be lacking in the energy necessary for this type of story. Overall, the tone is just rather dull and unengaging. It certainly has the potential, but it is not as dark or as fun as it should be, and I leave it with a D.
Well, this movie really is just a big mess. The story is weak and uninteresting. The performances are just bad, especially the Bridges garble, which is now in every movie.
I couldn't hear anything you're saying.
I don't understand
why he's doing that.
Well, yeah, I really don't. The one and only saving grace for me in this film is the visual component.
It was alright.
The visual effects are good here, good enough that I can't fail it, so I leave it with a D as well, but with an asterisk that if I can't fail this movie, I am rescinding my F for Project Almanac, because that was much more enjoyable to watch than this. So they both get D's, I guess, in my book. But I can't fail this just because of the visual component.
It did look pretty cool.
But it's not an enjoyable movie at all. I can't recommend it.
It's not engaging at all, no.
Justin?
Well, this is another film with serious star power that has gone completely and utterly down the dumpster. Now, all three of us have poked fun at Bridges' near incomprehensible mumbling over the course of probably 2-3 years, maybe more.
Yeah.
Here, he's audible maybe half the time.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky is a good way to put it. Some of the action I thought was engaging, and I think in the right hands, this might have been a fun movie. And I think it could have led to a decent franchise. But it stays so in between the lines with YA adaptation cliches, flashbacks to reveal possible conspiracy related to the main character, love interest that comes out of left field, mandatory action sequences. The list goes on and on. It's so painfully by the numbers. But like I said, I feel like this was still... I honestly hope somebody considers a reboot in a couple of years, because I do think there is something that could go off of with this. I leave it with a D+.
You know, I was looking into the background because I didn't know much about it, that it was based on the series. Looking up some of the background, it's one of those fan bases that has a wiki. And if you have a wiki, you have a fan base. And I was like, some of the stuff in the story seems kind of interesting. And like, so, you know, just thinking about this movie, like, I really wanted to like this movie. I really did, because there's some good ideas somewhere in here. But, God, it's like nobody was trying. It's just a mess of a story.
Well, even Julianne Moore doesn't really know
what to do,
what she's supposed to be doing. And this is the great Julianne Moore.
Exactly. Yeah. So, proof that directors and scriptwriters have an effect as well.
That's true. Well, let's move on. We have 9 movies to talk about this week. So, although, before we do, Justin, I am glad you brought up the romance, because here's another example of just a terrible, shoehorned, forced romance.
My least favorite thing, look,
it is.
Not every plot needs a romance to carry it. Sometimes there's enough going on. You don't need to just randomly insert some woman or man or whatever in there. You know, just stop. It just puts everything on a standstill.
And if it's a young adult adaptation, they have to.
Because, you know, teenagers have to see...
somebody fall in love in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, when, to be honest, half of them don't care right now.
Right. Well, and it bit him in the butt because nobody saw anything because they didn't come to this movie anyway. So,
Though I believe it broke even somehow, right?
no, it cost about $90 million to make.
Ooh, yeah, that's not recovering.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not.
So there's no Seventh Son in the future.
I would say no. I would say no to that. All right, so we're putting a cap on 2014 with this show. So we have 2 home media moments to do that with. The first is Men, Women, and Children. It's a 2014 drama comedy film with a large cast, including Adam Sandler, Rosemarie DeWitt, Jennifer Garner, Judy Greer, Ansel Elgort, and more, in which the characters deal with various online or social network obsessions and addictions. In the film, Sandler and DeWitt find themselves in a loveless marriage and both decide to secretly cheat on the other, while their son has a raging porn addiction. Jennifer Garner plays a mom obsessed with tracking every move of her teenage daughter, played by short-term 12's Caitlin Dever. She falls in love with another online obsessed teen, this time with a role-playing game, played by Elgort. There's a lot of other characters, some of which intertwine, some that don't, but we like to keep the show under 2 hours, so I'll just cut to the chase. Directed by Jason Reitman, who has helmed some of my favorite comedies of the last decade, including Juno, Young Adult, and Up in the Air. Unfortunately, Men, Women, and Children continues the slump he started with last year. A lot of potential, and up until the end, where half the characters' stories don't even resolve, or in some cases don't even get touched on, I was kind of in like the B range for it. Also, there's a thread throughout narrated by Emma Thompson about basically how insignificant we all are that seems very pretentious. During the movie, though, there are some good conversations, and it's kind of the decent character study it wants to be, so I leave it with a C+. Justin?
Yeah, I'm with you, Dan. How could the guy who made Up in the Air strike out twice in 1 year? This has such promising material, handled in a way that seems more at home as an after-school special than as a hard-hitting drama about social networking. I feel like the cast mostly does what they can with the material, save the completely wasted narration of Emma Thompson, which was beyond unnecessary. And I do feel like someday someone's going to say something really awesome and poignant about the subject matter of where we are with technology. But Men, Women, and Children is not the movie to do it. I give it a C+ as well.
Joe, how about for you?
Well, this film has the advantage and disadvantage of being very realistic. The subject matter was very timely, and there were many thought-provoking themes in the film that I cannot deny piqued my interest. Sadly, the movie bombards these ideas with narration at almost every turn. The cast is mostly good and do their best with the mixed material. The characters range from horrible to just okay, with only a few of them that I felt like I could truly get behind. Then again, many of these characters are supposed to be presented as flawed, so I could kind of see it as, once again, realistic. The big problem is that nothing really happens that is particularly interesting until the last 15 minutes or so, and of course, some things don't get resolved. It's not just that interesting, and easily about 30 minutes too long. I can't say that I wanted the storylines dropped, but 1 or 2 of the stories would have been sufficient, I think, to tell the story. Overall, this one is a very mixed bag for me. I also give it a C+.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't think... some of the characters just weren't necessary. Like, you thought it was too long. If you want to cut out 10, 15 minutes of the movie, you know, the girl with anorexia...
Completely unnecessary.
She doesn't resolve.
Nope.
She's
J.K.
easily
Simmons.
lifted out because she...
J.K. Simmons, thank you.
Great.
Has like 2 scenes.
I know.
That was really confusing.
Like an hour in, I said, what happened to J.K. Simmons?
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, and then he showed
that
up like
guy.
2 scenes later, but then that was it. I mean, she's easily lifted out. You know, the popular cheerleader girl, whatever, that gets with Adam Sandler's kid.
Not necessarily.
I
needed.
mean...
Not really.
Kind of, but
works.
not really.
You could have had them almost independent of each other, didn't necessarily
Right.
have to intertwine.
And then the Dean Norris story from Breaking Bad, him and Judy Greer going out, that didn't need to happen. That didn't make any sense.
No, I mean, I thought it was okay, but...
I mean, they both had kids that were having problems. He has Ansel Elgort that's addicted to the online game. She's got the daughter who's kind of whoring it up online.
But it's
But
like...
why did they go out? Like, that seemed
Because
unnecessary.
they were both single, they had similar issues, and then they were just like, oh, not really.
Yeah.
See, it didn't really even go anywhere. So.
Yeah.
Well, they're the only ones in the whole movie, really, that aren't addicted to
Something.
technology and everything. So I don't understand why they were even in the movie. Yeah, it's just a lot of like people that go nowhere. in the movie.
It's a lot of unresolved storylines because there's too many characters, I think.
Yes, I think that is the problem.
Honestly, if you wanted to make this movie coherent, it'd be like 40 minutes long.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, I don't think it needed to be super short, but I mean, it's just, it needed a little more focus, cut out a couple of those characters. But there were a lot of good things in the movie, though, so it's like...
Absolutely.
Like, I can't say that I was like, I kind of wanted to see where it was going, just most of it went really nowhere.
Yeah. And good conversations.
Yeah, some, like, the strongest scenes were between the people. I thought it was poignant. Like, there were some really good themes that was exploring.
Yeah.
And I liked some of the characters. And
another good dramatic Sandler performance.
yeah, I thought he was fine.
I wish there was more of Sandler in this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he actually, I was worried, but he was
The
probably...
words that Justin will never say again on this show.
No, it's,
Well, wait until Reign Over Me too, I guess.
no, Sandler was one of the best parts of it, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dean Norris was great, though. I was glad he was in it.
I mean, he's always good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sort of an unnecessary character, I felt like.
Yeah,
Or at least their relationship was.
Their relationship, yes.
I don't know that he needed to be taken out of the
For
movie.
his son, it was kind of crucial.
Right,
especially
right.
towards the end, but... Yeah,
At least limit his role.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
give him the more J.K. Simmons-ish role, and then take J.K. Simmons
out of
and
the
the
picture.
daughter out of the movie
I think
completely.
they just wanted to have the two bald guys they couldn't pick, so they had them both in there.
Yeah, maybe. Michael Chiklis was busy. All right, well,
Exactly.
up next we have Rosewater, and that's with Justin.
Maziar Bahari, played by Gael Garcia Bernal, is a journalist who, after doing a satirical interview sketch for The Daily Show, was considered a spy by the Iranian government and held in containment for 118 days. During his incarceration, Bahari was forced to be blindfolded and interrogated by a man whose only distinguishable feature was the smell of rosewater, and is played by Kim Bodnia. Director Jon Stewart, in his debut, has a lot to say. But like most contemporary directorial debuts, I think a lot of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's with Don John, what he's trying to say gets kind of muddled in the endgame. While Bernal continues to show his acting talent, loved him in No, Rosewater starts off being sort of a commentary on the state of global media, and then sort of diverts later on to being more focused on him once we get into the actual cell. The message is good, and there are some potentially powerful moments, most notably near the end, but as a whole, the film's just merely okay rather than something really special. I give it a B-.
Joe, what did you think of Rosewater?
Stewart certainly shows promise here. He utilizes his background in journalism to meld documentary-style filmmaking with dramatizations that are interesting, but not always in the most seamless of ways. There are good performances, though some elements of the script lack a certain punch. Hallucinations of ghosts seem slightly off-putting at first, and the humor of the movie, while enjoyable, almost detracts from the potential horror of these events. While this is a good start, it is lacking in the weight necessary for a grand drama. Still, I expect even greater things from Stewart. Me gusta si. I give it a B.
Yeah, Stewart shows some real promise here behind the lens, allowing the story to unfold at its own pace, though it's hard not to see the personal attachment to the project shining through, which can be a bit of a negative. I do agree that he focuses a little bit on some of the humorous aspects.
Which is weird.
Which is weird, because it's really a dark subject. But I think Bernal gives another outstanding performance here, like we saw in No. But we don't get a lot of emotional attachment to his character. I think we feel for him, but I wasn't sure that I really knew him all that well.
You know, well, that's the thing. They set you up with the basics. Like, okay, he's got a wife, he cares about, he's got his people, and he's got some history, and that's about it.
Right. Like, I felt, Justin, this was one of the movies on your best of 2014 list, but Omar really gave us a good mix of both.
Yeah.
And here I don't think we get that. I do think it's a very emotional, hard-hitting piece. It almost hits all the right notes, but I think toned down the comedy a little bit. But I do think Stewart's a good director and shows some real promise here. I give it a B.
Yeah.
I'm definitely with you, gentlemen. I think Stewart's going to be a really awesome director in a couple of years. He's this is just less of a stepping stone for him.
Well, and it's a passion project.
That too.
And it sort of shows, Maybe sometimes people need to get a little more distance so they can, I don't know, get a clearer picture of everything.
Like, you could tell this is a Jon Stewart movie. Even though it's dramatic, you're
Right.
like, yeah, I could feel it.
Right. And him being directly involved with the story,
You can understand why.
Yeah, you can understand why, but at the same time, I think it clouds his judgment a little bit.
He romanticizes it a little bit, do you think?
Maybe. Yeah.
And also, obviously he has a very kind of limited perspective
Right.
in a way.
Right.
Because he has his own personal viewpoints. And let's face it, that always clouds judgment when you're personally involved.
Right. I agree.
So, I mean, there's some real truth there, but, do we get everything we need to? Like, I wanted to learn certain aspects about the other side, and it's kind of like it's almost like satirizing the tortures. I'm thinking, these are some scary people.
Right.
I kind of, we learn a little bit about what motivates them, but I feel like there's still more about Iran we could learn,
Mm-hmm.
Like
Not much, but
there's much more,
Most of the testimonies are probably just from him being blindfolded, so it's really hard to say how much they could have gotten.
No, not just that necessarily, but just, I think just the entire impact of the atmosphere.
Just some sort of background on
about the whole culture.
the scene.
Because
Yeah.
we learn a lot, but they feel like there's even more we could know.
Okay, that's a fair argument.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, now we're going to get into our top 5 Julianne Moore performances. She wowed us all in Still Alice, and then Seventh Son she was also a part of. I'll start with my 5 through 2 here. I do have an honorable mention first up, and that is her character as the doctor's wife in Blindness. I chose this because it is such a terrible movie, yet Julianne Moore is still great in it, and it's the only reason that I gave the movie a passing grade. I don't think either of you gentlemen have ever seen it.
No.
It's the one where everyone goes blind but her.
I think I have seen it.
And you have seen it. It's bad, right?
I turned it off. So
Yeah, it's terrible. But it just shows the power of Julianne Moore and how she can really, even in Seventh Son where she didn't really know what her character was supposed to be doing, hard to take your eyes off the screen when she was on it. My number 5 is Alma Coin from The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. I'm very interested to see what she's going to be doing in Part 2, as I did not read the book. But her scenes in the first Mockingjay movie are great. She has a very authoritative attitude, and I like her with that hair color, too. the silver, it looks good. Number 4 for me is Jules Allgood in The Kids Are Alright. This is just a fantastic romantic comedy. It's her and is it Emma Thompson is the other one?
I believe it's Annette Bening.
Annette Bening, the face of love herself. Yes, her and Annette Bening really give a truthful kind of story here, which, it could have been, it's one of the first, lesbian comedies that there's been that isn't, poking fun at, oh, look at the gay people, It's a really true-to-life thing, and some really good performances by other people as well, but, of course, Moore shines. Number 3 is Margaret White from the Carrie remake. The movie was so-so, but if you're going to go see Carrie, you see it for Julianne Moore's insane mother. She doesn't go, too far off the deep end. She goes just the right amount and makes this character just a fun time to watch. And number 2 is Julian Taylor from Children of Men. One of the most underrated movies of the last decade in that really no one ever talks about this. But it's just such a good movie. And she gives a great performance here, as she always does. But it's a crucial character as well. She's not just standing on the sidelines for that one. Joe, what about you?
Well, I actually think I have to give an honorable mention because... you're right. She was the best thing about Carrie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's not. I'll let that be my honorable mention because she was fantastic in that movie. My number 5, I think this is kind of obligatory, but Maude from The Big Lebowski. This is kind of a very different character for her, just playing something really off the wall, but really easily one of the most memorable characters in a movie that's full of crazy characters. So definitely got to give it to her there. Number 4 is Susanna from What Maisie Knew. Justin recommended this movie.
Yeah, this is a great movie.
Just really good movie, but I think the thing that's fascinating about it is that she plays a character that you kind of don't like. She's very frustrating, but once again, very believable, very real, and I think that she's somebody that really brings that to her roles. Number 3 is Laura Brown from The Hours. Probably one of the most depressing movies ever made, but wow, if there's a woman that can just really make you even more depressed, just you literally feel it with her character. I think that her particular segment of the story is easily the best part.
I have not seen that one.
Neither have I.
Tough movie to get through, but the performances of all the leads, I believe it's Streep.
Nicole Kidman fake nose, right?
Yeah, Kidman. Yes, the Kidman and Streep, of course.
Oh, very good.
And the best. So
wow.
What a female cast.
Yeah,
there.
some powerhouses there.
Yeah, good movie. Number 2 is Linda Partridge from Magnolia. I mean, really,
another good one.
Another fantastic movie with a lot of great performances. Once again, Hoffman among a lot of great ones. But just, I loved her character. This movie, just so tragic. Just her desperation. Just, you truly feel it. And for a fairly early performance from her, I think it just showed all the greatness that was going to come in the future.
Yeah. Didn't feel right putting that on my list. It's been about 10 years since I've seen it. Probably a little more.
I would have put,
but
probably would have put The Lady from Children of Men. But I haven't seen that movie in like about 7 years.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard when we do the performances to think back. You know, it's easier to remember the more
What I think
recent
about this
ones.
one.
Yeah, exactly. Justin, how about for you?
All right. Well, to keep up the streak, I will also have a honorable mention, and that is Julianne from Children of Men. Small role, but really crucial and really, really good. I remember once her character leaves, just thinking, I wish they had put her in there longer. Such an underrated movie. I could not agree more with you on that one, Dan. I absolutely need to rewatch that.
And the mark of a great performance when you want to see more of them.
I don't want to segue too much from this, Justin. You keep saying it's underrated. I mean, I know generally people want to talk about it, but I mean, this is like one of the highest rated movies ever, though.
Joe, it got perditioned.
Say no more. Say no more.
It got perditioned.
Yeah, it's enjoyed, but no one talks about it.
You're right. Nobody,
And it's a shame.
People know it's good, but nobody talks about
Yeah.
it. Good point.
All right, but to get to my list. Number 5, Linda Partridge, Magnolia. Strange character in a very, very strange film, but I love it. Yet, just like when we did our Hoffman list, great job amongst a brilliant ensemble, and easily one of the most memorable cinematic meltdowns. Number 4, Jules from The Kids Are Alright. I think this movie's extremely overrated, but I think it's of no fault of Moore or Annette Bening as her partner. Both are absolutely fantastic in this movie, and they completely sell the lesbian angle with great chemistry, tension, and a couple funny moments on the side.
That's one I really need to see now.
The movie's an A. It's not overrated.
I just wish the film as a whole had been a better accompaniment. Whether or not that was because of the wrath of Mia Wasikowska, I don't know.
Well, she sucks the life out of everything. You're right.
Number 3 is Alice. Still Alice. Talked about it earlier. Great performance. Really, she brings us this character that deteriorates over the course of an hour and 40 minutes, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. And my number 2 is Maud Lebowski, The Big Lebowski. While the outlook on the non-stop profanity of this film is incredibly divisive, it is an outstanding performance from Moore. Yet it brings out more characterization in this seemingly one-dimensional dude. We get this whole backstory about him in the second nearing on third act, and it's awesome. Yet also retains this constant icy demeanor that fits in perfectly with Joel Coen's quirky tale.
And a much less garbled Bridges.
Touche.
Well before he discovered his technique.
Garble.
Yeah.
Garbling everything.
Method.
Yeah, that's the school of Bridges.
The school of marble acting.
Yep. All right, Joe. I think you and I might agree on our number ones here. What do you have?
Did you go first?
Oh, I did go first. Well, I still think we're going to agree.
Okay. So I'll find out in a second.
No, number 1 for me is Dr. Alice Howland, Still Alice. This is just a home run performance. 10, 15 years from now, if we did this list again, I can't imagine it's going to be topped. I mean, this is just one of the great performances from one of the great actresses. Every so often, you'll see somebody do something that you're just like, okay, I knew they were good. This is a cut above what I believed they could do. And that, for me, is Still Alice.
Oh.
Joe?
Well, I think you have a pretty good guess there, because, it did bump it up to my top 10 for some reason.
Right.
But no, really, yes, I'm in full agreement. I mean, just Dr. Alice from Still Alice. I mean, Julianne Moore has always been one of my favorite actresses. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had no doubt she was really one of the best. But this movie is just fantastic, mostly because of her performance. Mm-hmm. She just delves so completely into it. And like I said in my review, just the slow, just descent that your character has is just amazing. I think she gives herself fully into the character, and it's just outstanding.
Yeah. Justin, how about for you?
Well, my number 1 is a movie that we will hopefully be talking about next year, and that is Amber Wave's Boogie Nights. Moore's first Academy Award nomination, and was totally robbed with respect to Kim Basinger for L.A. Confidential. Oh. In a world defined by debauchery, plays this almost motherly voice of reason, haunted by her own personal demons. And while she may not be always front and center in the film, when the focus is on her, she completely steals the show.
Yeah, I gotta see this Boogie Nights.
Yeah, Boogie Nights. I haven't seen that in a long time.
It was on the list when Philip Seymour Hoffman died too,
Yeah.
and then I just decided, well, we're gonna watch it in a year or two anyway for the show. So
Ray Wahlberg as well.
well, always great Wahlberg to me personally, but all right. Well, up next we have our triple feature of older films. That's going to include an obscure 1940 movie called Arise, My Love, and Justin's pick for old classic, The Royal Tenenbaums. But first is our new classic, and that is a movie that appeared on several of our top 20 lists for 2013, and that is Trance. Joe?
Now, Trance is a 2013 British psychological thriller directed by Danny Boyle with a screenplay by Joe Arning and John Hodge. An art auctioneer named Simon, played by James McAvoy, has become mixed up with a group of criminals to steal a valuable painting. It's a Goya, that is an artist, not the beans. However, when Simon comes down with amnesia after the painting is hidden, he is sent to a hypnotherapist, played by the lovely Rosario Dawson, in order to recover the lost painting. This is a very interesting and complicated film. I think that while most of the characters are not exactly likable, the intrigue of the mystery and the charm of their interactions are enough to keep us interested. It is stylish and a great crime thriller with a surreal edge that I still enjoy. I will admit that some of the transitions are questionable, and the premise does stretch believability at times, but there is enough going on here to keep you sufficiently entertained, and I leave it with a B+.
Justin?
That's a little lower than last time.
Yeah, a little bit. That would make your top 20, I would think.
No, it was an A- last time. Upon a second viewing, I thought it was a little silly.
Okay.
Director Danny Boyle's one of my favorite contemporary filmmakers, and while I don't think this is his best, it still serves as an adequate showcase of his talent. He tells this complete mind-bender of a storyline that, while I do think it becomes a bit of a hassle to keep up with at times, particularly around the halfway point, still keeps the audience intrigued in solving its massively layered mystery. I think we all agree there's more layers in this than the entirety of Inception. I think some scenes go on longer than they probably should, and the final reveal doesn't quite hit as hard as it should, but easily one of the more unique psychological thrillers in recent years, and well worth giving a watch. I give it a B+ as well.
Well, as you guys may know, I am a Danny Boyle fan. Other than the horrible movie Sunshine, I have really enjoyed all of his films that I've seen. Trance is certainly not his best, you're right about that, Justin, but it is one of his most ambitious. It's got all of these layers upon layers, and you really do have to pay attention. The performances are great. McAvoy delivers certainly one of his best here. I think it probably tries a little too hard to be Inception. So, for me, it didn't quite work on all of the same levels that film did, but it also falls prey to some of the same pitfalls that befell Inception. But it is beautifully shot, hard to look away from. It's a B+ for me as well.
B+.
Yeah, I think I gave it an A-. Actually, I think I gave it a B+, and then by the end of the year had bumped it up to an A-. Thinking about it, and then after watching it the second time, bumping it back down. But
it's a movie that's still on that line for me.
Mm-hmm.
I still could easily shift to an A-, but just like, I don't know, some of the silliness of the whole plot, like when you really look at it, it's like, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where you really have to suspend your disbelief. Like it's a little much, but it's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
One of my bigger issues with it is it starts off being one character story with McAvoy, and then by the end of it we find out it's really this guy's story. And that kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
I didn't mind that so much. I thought that was pretty intriguing, actually.
Well, I have mixed feelings about that because I thought it was a good reveal because it shows us very different perspectives as the movie goes along. There's a couple people we're learning about completely. It was a good twist, but the cool thing about it is I feel like that if it had just been almost not necessarily like quite as complicated, but a little more standard of a thriller with this whole cat and mouse game with the whole. I feel like that initial setup with him, where he's just kind of describing everything about his routine. If they had just done the movie along those lines, like a more traditional thriller, I feel like it could have been excellent that way as well. I feel like the whole. I know the whole hypnotherapy thing is kind of the hook, but a very different movie at the beginning, and then they just go radically different the rest of the movie. So I don't know. I feel like you go in a very different direction.
I think Boyle could have done it, you're right, either way, and it would have still been enjoyable.
Like, it still could have had a lot of twists and turns, but they tried to go a little more metaphysical with the psychological aspects and the Inception. It's cool, but you could tell it gets bogged down by that as the movie goes down. It's almost suffocating it towards the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you mentioned the great Mordecai parallel with the the stolen artwork.
The stolen Goya, yes.
God.
They really like those Goyas.
They do.
Yes, so.
They do. Okay, so Justin brought for his old classic pick the Royal Tenenbaums. So why don't you tell us about that, Justin?
For years, child prodigies Chaz, Margot, and Richie Tenenbaum, played by Ben Stiller, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Luke Wilson, have loathed their father Royal, played by Gene Hackman, for his constant put-downs and eventually leaving them. However, when he returns years later to announce he's terminally ill, Royal reunites his estranged family in an attempt to right some wrongs. Now, for my first serious pick of 2015, well, at least in terms of straightforward, non-guilty pleasure, I wanted to do something crazy, until I realized, what if I did something totally, and I'm making up a word here, unjust-y? And I thought, why not bring a movie that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I do respect, which the Royal Tenenbaums fits that bill perfectly. And it's largely for one very simple reason. It is an incredibly depressing movie. There's a sort of upbeat nature to it, and I'm still not entirely sure how to take Hackman because he's kind of an anti-hero, but I think Danny Glover says it best at one point. I don't hate you, but you are kind of a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do appreciate Anderson's work on this, seeing how it influenced some of his other movies later on. Moonrise Kingdom, Grand Budapest Hotel for this year's Academy Awards. And I really do think that they do play these really interesting characters. I just wish it was a little bit more engaging. I wish that it wasn't trying to be so quirk for quirk's sake at times. But it has definitely gotten better. I think in a couple years I could definitely see giving it a higher grade. But for now, it was originally a B-. I'm giving it a B.
Well, I agree. You are famous for not liking this movie, but you love Wes Anderson. So for me, when you pulled this out and said it was very unjust, and I sort of thought, well,
it isn't.
Maybe, yeah, but not really. I think I've never seen. This is the one, other than Bottle Rocket, that I've never seen of the Anderson filmography. I think it's very funny. Hackman and Stiller specifically do some of their best comedy work here. I thought Paltrow was very good as well. The characters are great. The story's solid. But I do think some of the actors seem a little bit lost in what their characters are supposed to be doing, maybe because there's too many of them.
I can see that too.
I think Anderson's trying to cram a little too much in here. And of course, my biggest problem with Anderson is always the quirk for quirk's sake. I don't think it's as bad here as it is in some of his other films. And in fact, we had a discussion on this show during Grand Budapest asking what is the most accessible Anderson movie to introduce somebody to. One of you said The Royal Tenenbaums and the other disagreed. I don't know which said which, but I would offer up this one as well. You said it would be this one. Joe, I would offer this one as well. I mean, I think even though the characters are very quirky, it's also probably the least Anderson-y Anderson movie. He focuses more on the characters themselves than the let's make the sets quirky and let's make the design of the cinematography quirky. The characters are what's quirky, and that's, I think, a little more relatable. So I do agree with that choice. For me, the film is a B+. Joe?
I've always liked the Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, yeah.
There are some hints of the great technique and unique style of Anderson at work here, with many of his quirky attributes and characters. It is well shot and paced, with energetic wit and humor, but with elements of believable family drama, which is definitely the best part about it. Hackman is really just practically steals the show with Royal, and most of the cast is really up to the task as well, as most Anderson casts are. The movie is fun and never gets boring. It's just a joy to watch. The only major issue I have with it is Owen Wilson's character. In fact, his whole arc seems to derail the film and is completely unnecessary. Not saying it's a bad performance, just never really liked the character. I don't think he really adds anything. You can take him out. I'd leave it with an A-.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. Owen Wilson is one of the ones,
he's the third wheel.
I agree it's not a bad performance.
You got to take him out of the movie.
He just doesn't really have anything to contribute.
He's the guy who lived near the Tenenbaums and knows them, and family friend who is a horrible person.
It's kind of like the Timothy Oliphant character in This Is Where I Leave You. Another movie where there's maybe one or two characters too many. Yeah. He's the neighbor. You just lift him right out and nobody cares.
Won't miss a beat.
Yeah, won't miss a beat. Nobody's the wiser. But Stiller is really good in this.
Stiller's really funny.
He is, and I mean, he's always funny, but at this point in his career, he was doing more of the Zoolander dodgeball type movies where it's like really going for like broad comedy.
Slapstick and everything.
Yeah, it's slapsticky type stuff. And here he's really able to showcase his more, I don't know if restrained is the right word, but
dry.
More dry wit, I guess you could
more
say.
dialogue heavy rather than physical comedy.
Right. Which, of course, is another Anderson staple.
And it touches on some of his dramatic abilities, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
It does. I would consider it actually one of his better dramatic performances as well.
Yeah, Ben Stiller does
if you want to look at it that way.
Really good job in this movie as well. And Paltrow, early performance from her.
Paltrow is very good in this. I really, at the time this was released, I did not like Paltrow at all. It took me a long time to be on board with her.
What changed your mind? If you don't mind
Probably
asking?
the first Iron Man, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I never saw Shakespeare in Love, I'll say that, but a lot of those earlier movies like Bounce, and they just, they were just bad.
To be fair
enough, I can see where you come from
She
now.
was in a lot of kind of mediocre movies, though, for a while.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. That duets with Huey Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
It just, God bless her. She seemed like a nice person, but until she was Pepper Potts, I would have to say I didn't really like her. But if I had seen this, maybe I would have changed my mind a little earlier. But yeah, this was a good choice. I mean, I really enjoyed watching it, Justin.
Okay.
I'm glad you're coming around on it as well.
Yeah, I think in a couple years I'll definitely appreciate this a little bit more. It's just a matter of getting there and growing up a little bit, I guess.
I would say, other than maybe Life Aquatic, this is the... Oh, I haven't seen that one either, so that's the other one.
I don't think
Yep.
so.
Other than Life Aquatic, I would say this is the most divisive of the Anderson movies.
I feel like there have been some people mention they don't like it as much, but it's also been mentioned as like one of the greatest movies of all time in some lists.
Yeah.
so
Some
it's like,
circles, yeah.
So I don't know.
I think that's the discrepancy.
That's like-
people
like-
think it's... people don't necessarily hate it, but they either think it's like all right,
or it's the best.
or it's the greatest movie they've ever
So
seen.
yeah, you're right. In terms of divisiveness, it's more like on a certain scale of divisive.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards the great, but I'm not quite there.
Okay.
It's mostly Owen Wilson though. If you took that out, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
I would agree.
Honestly.
And listen, a great Luke Wilson performance.
I'm fine with
That'll
Luke
give
Wilson.
you.
Yeah, Luke
You know?
Wilson does a great job as well. But I feel like it's almost like, hey, can we have Owen in here as well? Because
I know.
Well, it wasn't Bottle Rocket. Why not?
yeah,
Well, and this was the era when every Ben Stiller movie had to have Owen Wilson,
they're
too.
also buddies as well.
You know? So it's like...
Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, between that and the Luke Wilson connection, I guess they sort of felt like they had to do it. But of course, Anderson likes him anyway because he was in Darjeeling, he was in Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh no, I mean it's
gets
fine.
around.
It's
So-
fine with him being there. It's just that the character he played in the movie was next to pointless.
Right.
You know?
No, I
Pretty much,
completely
yeah.
agree. Completely agree. Okay, well, the final film in our show is the 1940 film Arise, My Love, that won Best Story, and it was nominated for 3 artistic Oscars: music, cinematography, and art direction. Towards the end of the Spanish Civil War, Tom, played by Ray Milland, is a prisoner of war awaiting execution when a reporter named Gusto Nash, played by Claudette Colbert, gets him released by posing as his wife. Soon, the prison learns of the ruse, and the two are on the run, ending up in Paris during the start of World War II. Now, believe it or not, this movie is a romantic comedy, and actually a pretty effective one at that. It doesn't have quite the romance or the comedy of Colbert's most famous work, It Happened One Night, 5 years earlier, but it is a pretty enjoyable film. There's a few good lines, and the relationship aspect is certainly old hat by today's standards, but in 1940 I could definitely see the appeal of this sort of back and forth. It isn't quite as memorable as some of the earlier films we've watched, but I will also give it points for addressing current events and even changing aspects of the script throughout filming to reflect what was going on in the news at the time. I give Arise, My Love a B. Joe?
Arise, my love. It's like rise from your grave. You remember? You know, and if you're familiar with it, either of you guys familiar with Altered Beast? Rise from your
No.
grave. Not at all.
I don't believe so.
Classic.
This is a movie?
Sega Genesis.
Oh, I do remember Altered Beast. I never played it,
from
though.
your- You know, come on.
Yeah.
So for the one person out there that gets it, you're good. Awesome. All right. Well, this is not like that at all. As far as propaganda films go, this is a pretty good one. The romance is strong enough with the two likable leads and a rather unique setup for the film. I've always been fascinated by the Spanish Civil War, and this would have been a pretty heated topic leading right into World War II, and kept in really going by the engaging, witty dialogue between the two main characters and good performances from both of them. I agree. It Happened One Night is a fantastic movie. This has some of the elements of that. It's not quite as memorable, but it works. I give it a B as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably like an A, and this is probably a B.
That's right.
Justin?
Screenwriter Billy Wilder may not have been the insightful, ahead-of-his-time storyteller yet, but this still shows that even in his early years, he had some really awesome observations and really clever commentary, even in a kind of propagandistic setting. While Arise My Love's far from original and beyond predictable, it's elevated by a fun storyline with two great leads who play off each other beautifully for some good humor and undeniable chemistry. Unfortunately, the propaganda undertones do get in the way from time to time, most notably near the end, and keep it from elevating to being something greater, and whether or not it's because of cultural zeitgeist at the time, being World War II and what have you. But honestly, it's still a very enjoyable Oscar pick. I'm glad I watched it. I give it a B as well.
Yeah, their chemistry is great here. I am not familiar with The Gentleman, but Colbert obviously we've seen before. But yeah, I thought they did really good playing off each other.
Yeah, they're funny.
It is pretty predictable, but so is every romance
Pre-1960.
I was going to say 1980. Yeah, The Apartment is probably the first one to really turn it on its ear a little bit. You're right. So I can't really take off too many points for that.
Like I said, it works.
Yeah, I think it works for what it is, and definitely hard to track down, though. We're listeners, if you're paying attention, we ran this a little bit out of order. We had already covered The Artist before this because it's so hard to track down. Yeah, so if you can find it,
It's worth it.
It's worth a watch. If not, It Happened One Night is a lot more easy to find and a better film. But this one does the trick as well if you're into the old school romances. I will admit the propaganda,
Pretty heavy-handed.
it's a little heavy-handed, yes.
Well, the cool thing about it, though, is it was before we were actually in the war. So
yeah, that's what I thought was interesting about it. They kept sort of changing the story.
It would have been daring for the writers. They wanted to push, let's get involved. So maybe it was a good thing. Who knows?
Yeah. So I did kind of like that aspect of it. But it is a little propaganda heavy, you're right. All right, well, that is going to do it for the show this week. Now that we're done with our 2014 films, we're going to go back to a slightly less demanding docket these next few weeks here, and
Thank goodness.
we'll get back to that. But a lot still going on. We do have The Kingsman coming up next week. That has come out already, among some other things. Joe, you got a lot of things going on with the Merlin page.
Oh,
Every
yeah.
couple of days uploading something new.
I actually checked. I reviewed a video a day, all day last week.
Is
so.
that right?
my word.
Wow.
So yeah, I gave the people what they wanted. Just some anime related videos, and one of our Sopranos videos went up recently. So yeah, just tried to get something up for everybody and did a live stream. So
It really is something for everybody over there at the Merlin channel.
I try to keep something for all the different subscribers I have.
Yeah.
People have different interests. So
That's true.
Everything you want.
All right, well, for those of you listening that have not subscribed to our channel yet, you can go ahead and do that. We'd love to have you aboard. The Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And our Twitter feed is at Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!